Good morning, friends. Good morning, Vinayak.
Good morning, sir.
Sir.
Yes. Let's begin our session. I'm just reading a news which is telling that in Chennai, a refrigerator burst and gas leaked from that, and it suffocated the entire room. 3 people have died in that incident. It's better to repair the refrigerator. We have to repair them time and again. And in one of the incident yesterday in my village, uh, a 15-year girl died due to food poison. Actually, she had taken that noodles from some shop, and after that, for 3 days, she has been suffering with the stomach pain and all. So later, she was died. Okay, she is from very affluent family, very rich family. Uh, but
Noodles means like that. Uh, in between that has been like
noodles,
banned. That
I
noodles,
these things like why
two
she
minute
will.
noodles.
Yeah, haven't you seen this in
Mac.
Bihar? Fast food centers, we will be seeing that, right? This thing. This I right from my birth, I did not even eat that in single day. Okay, so these food things which are we see on the roadside will cause a lot of problem. They will mix different chemicals, even in the hotels, in puris and all those things. Uh, some bromide will be added. Many chemicals will be added. Okay.
Oh yes.
So we should not prefer that. Mostly the software engineers and all, when they come weekend, they will bring their children to some tours and all. In that case, they may prefer to eat those kind of tasty foods, but those are not good for health.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Right, sir.
Very sad incident happened in my village yesterday. Right. Now let's go for, yeah, so we have seen deployment. Now let's come to namespace. So when I type here kubectl get pods, it will tell that no resources found in default namespace. By default, we are in default namespace. What is namespace? Let's understand. So let's say we have 3 homes in our neighborhood. 3 homes are there. Or let's say this is our village. There are, let's take 3 typical villages. Here, a person called Ramesh will be there. Here in this house, Ramesh, and here also Ramesh will be there. Let's say in this also Ramesh will be there. Okay. Let's say Lakshmi in India. So mostly girls will be having names like Lakshmi, Kaveri, Ganga. These are river names. Okay.
Right.
And yeah, these things. So in many villages and in my wife's village, there is a temple. Yelagonda Swami temple is there. About, and the population of that village is about 1200. Okay, 1200 population. About 20 people have their names as Yelagonda because of the god Yelagonda Swami. Okay, so the culture will influence all our names and everything, right? So that is fine. I don't want to go into that thing now. So let's say 3 Ramesses are there in different houses. So a person from the same home, let's say his brother or someone, will call Ramesh. Okay, when they call Ramesh, which Ramesh will be responding? This Ramesh. They are in the same home, and when they call
Shall we
Ramesh,
do?
obviously they
Are you
are
talking?
repeating. I'm talking. Are you not able to hear me?
Hello.
Others, can you please tell me, Anji or Aruna, am I audible?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. You are audible.
Okay, Vinayak, it seems like problem from your side.
Are you getting my voice? Hello, Anil?
Yes, we are
Yes,
getting
Vinayak.
you.
Yes.
Let me type that here.
Excuse me. Hello.
Vinayak, we are able to hear you.
Honey, Anji.
Yes, Vinayak. We are able to hear you.
Okay. No problem.
Okay. So,
Lakshman sir,
yes, yes.
now your voice is audible. Okay.
Okay.
You were not audible. Yes, go ahead.
Okay. So I am audible to others. So please check your earphones if you have any problem in it.
Oh, okay.
Okay, Ramesh.
Yeah, Vinayak. Yeah.
Yeah, this is
Okay.
Ramesh. Here also Ramesh is there. Here also Ramesh is there. And this Ramesh, this person can directly call Ramesh. And obviously he is referring to this Ramesh only. And let's say, and if some family member is there here, and if he's calling some Ramesh internally, so obviously this is the Ramesh that they are referring. Same thing goes here as well. But let's say some person, some postman came into that village to deliver some post. Okay, now that postman is here. When I say, and he will meet some person and I will ask for the particular Ramesh. And obviously they will ask which Ramesh. Okay, and that Ramesh should be identified with the surname or the father name.
Right.
Okay, within the same home, he can be referred as Ramesh, here also Ramesh. So now coming to namespace as well, coming to namespace, in Kubernetes, namespaces provide a mechanism for isolating groups of resources. This will be useful when I tell the naming convention of the particular resources. And as of now, you don't need to think about that. In Kubernetes, namespaces provide a mechanism for isolating groups of resources within a single cluster. That means single cluster we have, and you want to run both dev and QA environment applications in the same cluster. This is our cluster, and as a part of cluster, let's say we have three nodes we have, and I can divide this cluster virtually into three compartments, three zones, like, and this namespace will span across the nodes. That means if I have three namespace, it doesn't mean that each namespace will be getting a node. No, it is some virtually three zones will be created inside the cluster.
What is the need of this basically namespace?
Yeah, I will come to that. I will understand. I will tell. These are something like folders. Okay, let's say we have uh, some payment thing is there, and we have say some front end things are there. All you want to separate them. Okay, uh, in separate folders you want to put, so that you can think this namespace, you can think like something like folders. So in this, what we are doing is we are dividing the cluster into three compartments, and these namespaces will span across the nodes. When we are doing after one or two in this class, we will understand what it is once we do practically. Names of resources need to be unique within a namespace. Let's say we have deployed a pod into this namespace, and that pod name is pod 1. We can't have the pod with the same name, but we can't. In a home, do we have two Rameshes? Two brothers can have Ramesh as their name? Slightly, at least it should be differ slightly. My brother and I can't have the same name called Ramesh. In the same namespace, we can't have two resources with the same name. That means we can't have two pods with the same name in the same namespace, but we can have a pod with name pod 1 here, and I can have the same pod with the same name here, but I can't have two pods with the same name in this namespace, in a particular namespace. Okay, that is, so that means we can't have two Rameshes in the single house. Single house in the sense I'm talking about the nuclear family, not the extended family. Nuclear family means wife, husband with their children is called as what? A nuclear family. So we can't have two siblings with the exactly same name. Okay, like that in namespace also we can't have two same kind of resources with the same name. You will understand that laterly. And one thing is that we can directly call that parent, that father can directly call the Ramesh with his name. But if this father, if this elder guy wants to call this Ramesh in the other namespace, in the other house, definitely he has to include the surname of the this particular Ramesh, surname or his father name. Okay, definitely we will use the surname. So why? Because there is a confusion whether he is calling this Ramesh or this Ramesh or some other Ramesh. So we have to identify particularly. Okay, that is why it is relevant. We will understand. There are some objects that can be deployed in a particular namespace. Namespace just simply they are folders. They are, you can think them like folders to group some similar kind of resources in
Lakshman, I
that.
have one doubt here.
Mm.
So the namespace, it is unique to the unique per node, or it's a common to all the so like is it cluster wise, or it's like
Yeah,
unique to node?
I will tell you. That's what I'm telling. There is no dependency between the node and the namespace. You should avoid thinking about the nodes when we are thinking about the namespace. Namespace is irrespective of the nodes. What I mean to say is it spans across the nodes. That means if you deploy some application using kind deployment and with 5 replicas, those 5 replicas will be on this node or this node or this node, and one on this node again and another one is on this, so total 5. So these are belonging to the single namespace and they are deployed into all the nodes. That means this namespace will span across the nodes. And that means what I mean to tell is there is no particular node that is allocated to a namespace. Okay, no. And here in this case, let's say we are deploying some deployment and it is having 3 pods in this. This pod can be here, another pod can be here, another pod. And in the same node, we are having the pods from different namespace. Understanding?
Yeah.
Yes. So these are some virtual classification of the cluster into different compartments. Okay. Let's say I have a big cluster and I want to run both dev and QA environment within the same cluster. And I can't, it is not good practice to run both the things in the same namespace. I will run dev deployments in this dev namespace and I will run QA deployments in the QA namespace. If I want to use the same environment for the production, I will create the production namespace and I will run the production related objects in this particular namespace. And one thing is that you can specify the resources for the namespace. That means, let's say, uh, total we have X amount of memory. Okay, 3x amount of memory, 3x amount of memory in the entire cluster. What I will do, I will just, I will allocate some 0.5 X amount of memory for this namespace. And after that, let's say, 1.5 X amount of memory to this namespace and 1x or just 1 and just X amount of memory. Total it will be 3. So I can specify the resources for that particular namespace. I can dedicate the resources for that namespace. There are some different compartments within the same cluster. Okay, and these namespace are cluster level. They are at the cluster level. Okay, they are not particular to particular namespace. They are available at the cluster level. Okay, and some objects we can deploy into the namespace. Let's say pod we can deploy into the namespace, and definitely we have to deploy into one or the other namespace. Till now we did not use any namespace. By default we are deploying that into default namespace. Okay, so there are some objects which are namespace scoped objects. That means they can be deployed into one or the other namespace, and there are some objects which are not particular to any namespace. They will be available at the cluster level. Let's say persistent volume, you will understand that later. It is at the cluster level. We have the cluster role, that is at the cluster level. We have storage class, that is at the cluster level. And nodes are existing at the cluster level. Nodes are not belonging to particular namespace. We can't create a node for a particular namespace. These nodes are available at the cluster level. And what other things persistent? These are at the cluster object, and there are some objects which are namespace scoped. That means they can be deployed into one or the other names. Let's say pod, replica set, replication controller, services, and most of the things are namespace scoped object. Okay, so now I want to check how many namespaces are there. For that, the command is kubectl get namespace. Get namespace or namespaces. Anything will work. So these are the namespaces. Or in short, you can have NS. And by default, these are the namespace that we get when we run Kubernetes in EKS. And all the cloud-based clusters will be having all these namespaces, whether you can run this cluster in Azure or GCP or anywhere. So any cloud-based Kubernetes cluster will be having these default namespaces already created, and the namespace default is the default one by which in which we always work by default. But we don't use a default namespace in real time. We will create some namespace and we will deploy the objects into that namespace. And this is kube node list, means some Kubernetes related cloud related objects will be running in this. We will check that. And we have kube public, whether it can be cloud based cluster or anything. This default kube system and kube public, these three namespaces will be there. And yeah, these things will be there. If you are using the cloud-based one, this will be, we will be getting in addition. Okay, so now these are, now let's observe what these namespaces are contained. So now kubectl get all. If I specify that, if I don't specify any namespace in the command, by default, it will give the objects which are there in the default namespace. And Kubernetes has created some service object in this particular cluster by default. We should not delete them, and we can't delete it as well. It will disturb our cluster. Okay, now what if I want to see the objects in other namespace? For that, we have to specify the namespace -n or -- namespace. Okay, I want to see the things in kube system namespace. Okay, so what it does is it will list out all the objects that are deployed in this kube system namespace. If you see by default, when we create the Kubernetes cluster and add the node groups, these things will be running. So a pod
object in terms of this is the pod, right?
Yeah, this is pod, and another Kubernetes object can be deployment, and there can be service, persistent volume, persistent. Those are called a Kubernetes object. Okay. So now by default in this kube system namespace, this AWS node related pods are running, core DNS is running, kubeproxy is running on every node. These are the objects, these are pods. And if we come to the services, this is the service that is there in the kube system namespace. And these are the daemon sets that are running in the kube system namespace. So we know what is daemon set. Daemon set means for every node we will be getting one replica. Okay, so this kube proxy will be there for every node. So that's why Kubernetes has deployed this using the daemon set. Kubernetes in the sense the AWS managed service. Okay, and we have a deployment called core DNS, and we have a replica set for this deployment. Okay, so these are all the objects that are deployed in the kube system. Who deployed that? Kubernetes has deployed that. When we are running the managed service, so these things will be deployed automatically by the Kubernetes. Okay, so now if I don't specify this namespace here, by default it will be like default namespace, and we can switch to another namespace also if you are working with something. And cube public will be there. This is something like another namespace where there won't be any objects, so no need to have any RBAC for this. Okay, now if we want to go for the default one, so in this default namespace, so one object is there, and cube node lease namespace is there. Cube node lease namespace is there, and in that so there are no, is this the namespace, is it correct? And one thing is that I don't know why it will happen in the Kubernetes. If I give some wrong namespace, that means if I give some namespace which is not at all existing in this cube node list, that is there, that is fine. Now I want to get the resources which are there in the dev namespace, and I can specify this hyphen namespace in short with hyphen n. Hyphen n, I want to see the things in cube system. Okay, we can use the hyphen n directly instead of using this lengthy one. We will be getting the same output. Now what I will do is I want to get the things in dev namespace. Now it is very strange. It will tell that no resources found in dev namespace. That means what we will think generally, there is dev namespace and there are no resources in that. That's way we think. Okay. So I don't know why Kubernetes has designed in such a way. What I'm expecting is that when we type this, it should give some result, something like there is no such namespace called dev. That should be the result. If that is the case, it will be good. I think so. But it is saying something like there are no resources found in the namespace. Now, if I type for Vinayak namespace in that, and let's see whether we have any objects. See, there are no resources found in this, and it is something like we can think. We generally think something like there is Vinayak namespace, but there are no resources in that, right? But I don't know why Kubernetes has designed such way. That is fine. Then how to create our own namespace? kubectl create namespace or create namespace dev namespace. See, namespace called dev is created. kubectl get namespace. See, dev has been created 7 seconds ago. And if I go into the dev, get all into the dev, we won't be getting any objects because we know that we did not deploy anything into that. We just have created that namespace. Now I will come to this. I will come to this when we get the service. Or else we can think like, let's say we have two namespace. One is default, another one is dev. Anyway, I will come to this a bit later. Otherwise, I will tell you that from here itself. Now let's say we have, I want to redraw this, even that is not needed to redraw. I want to redraw this. We have 3 nodes into this cluster. Okay, fine. Now what I'm doing is I'm trying to create a namespace here. This is dev namespace, and let's say we have we have a namespace and the namespace called some backend namespace, let's call it. Okay, this is dev namespace. This is some namespace called backend namespace. Not database. Anyway, that's not the name doesn't have any significance in this example. Now we have deployed a pod in this, and this pod can be placed on anywhere, on any node it can run, because the namespace will span across the nodes. Now let's say the name of this pod is DB service. DB service. So name of this pod in the sense, not the name of the pod. So it would be better if I explain this after I explain the services, but no worries. What we have done, we have created a pod, and how to access that pod application, we have to create some service object. We have seen load balancer, we have exposed the pod. So this is one pod, and we are creating a service object to access this pod, and we will attach this service object to this. That is fine. This is MySQL database, which is running inside this pod in a container. Then to access this MySQL, what I should do, I have to attach a service, or I have to expose this. I have exposed this, and that service name I am giving as a DB service. Now let's say we have some backend pod in this. We have some backend pod application running herein, and it can be running anywhere, any node. It can be running on any node. Now this backend needs this database. This backend needs this database. How this backend can access this database? Definitely with the service name. And if this backend is situated in the same namespace, okay, and this can directly access this using this MySQL SQL connect will be there. Directly it can access using this. So here the significance of telling this is, here this command should be used by this particular backend service, because this backend is deployed in the same namespace as that of the MySQL, and the service object DB service, it can directly connect to this database using MySQL connect or whatever the connection string may be. So DB service, the service name we are providing, that is fine. But it is something like Ramesh is there here, and his father is calling this Ramesh. How to directly can call with that name of the person, that is Ramesh. Now let's say this is another father. He is another father from different home, different house. Now how to call this service? In this case, he have to mention this is I don't know which you can use any MySQL connector anywhere. Now in this case, he can't directly call Ramesh as the Ramesh, because if he call Ramesh, conflict will come. Which Ramesh should respond? This Ramesh or this Ramesh? Which Ramesh should respond? So for that he has to particularly tell which Ramesh he is from. So for that here what he needs to do is, he has to provide the service name dot the namespace, and then dot svc dot cluster dot local. This is base domain. For example, if we are running the service in our same machine, how do we call them? Using local host. If it is different machine, we have different configuration, right? So like that, here he has to use what? He has to use the service name. Then after that, he has to use the namespace. What's the namespace? The dev namespace. Then after that svc dot cluster dot local. Okay, this is common for everything. This is some domain of the cluster. svc dot cluster. In case of service, in case of pod, we use the IP address of the pod and the namespace and the pod dot cluster dot local. This is called as what? Base domain inside the cluster. Okay, this is how we will call. And let's say if this MySQL is not deployed in the dev, if it is deployed in the some namespace called the prod namespace, let's say. Okay, let's take another namespace called the prod. This is prod. So in that case, how it will become? DB service dot prod dot svc dot cluster dot local. And if the prod database has to be called from dev, in that case, how it should call? It should call db service dot dev dot prod dot svc dot cluster dot local. Apart from that namespace, every other namespace object will have to call with this name. This is the domain name that will be available in the cluster for that particular MySQL which is running in the dev. If it is running in the prod, it will be dot prod svc dot cluster dot local, and it will be available throughout the cluster. Okay.
Means it is getting name is getting changed. Who is calling whom?
Yes,
Likewise.
yes. No, not who is calling who. If the same person who is sitting in the same namespace, if it wants to call, it doesn't need to use this. It doesn't need to use this particular thing. They can directly call. If they want, if other guys from the other namespaces wants to connect to this SQL, and this is the fully qualified name for that particular database. Okay, it differs whether the person is from the same namespace or the other namespace. For other namespace persons, and the name which they should call is this one. Okay, if it is running in the dev, but persons in the dev namespace can directly call him with the db service. Okay, they don't need to use this. Got it, Vinayak?
Yes, yes.
Sir, what could be the other option instead of local? So in that example, MySQL is calling that second.
No, this is
for
common. This is at the cluster
Instead of-
level subdomain.
Why you took local means like if that MySQL wants to call to the third node, second pod, backend namespace, it should be its IP.
No, no. So this is the service name. We are
Yeah.
accessing through the service object. If you want to access the IP address, we have to provide the IP address. But in Docker, I said that in container world, there is no significance for IP address. Why? Because this pod is now running. This pod may be terminated later. In that case, what will happen? We will be getting the other pod with the other IP address. If that is the case, and then conflict will come. We are accessing with the pod IP address, but that pod is not there.
I'm
So
talking
we
about
can't
the
rely on
dot
that.
local. So if that second node MySQL database, that pod second wants to
Yeah.
communicate with this third node second pod, that under backend.
Okay.
So still it will use dot local because they are in different node.
Not node, different namespace. I will tell you again. Yeah, could you please
This
repeat
code
your question?
where you will use Laxman, MySQL.connect. This one will be used
In front end, for
Docker image?
example, in front end application, the developers will be writing the code. So
Okay.
if you want to connect there, this is not our DevOps part. This is by the developers. Okay, and somebody, I forgot, Anji, are you or some other Debasys?
No, sir.
Yeah, it's Ritik.
Okay, Ritik. So please ask the question again.
So I want to understand, we use local because if it is in same namespace, right?
Whether it is in the same namespace or different, throughout the cluster, this is the base domain name of the cluster. At the
Okay.
cluster level. Okay, like say we have .co.in, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like that for the cluster, this is the higher level domain name.
Okay.
Base domain. This will be same. And if it is service object, we will be using SVC. If it is pod, we will be using the pod. If you are using IP address, we have to use the pod here. But we don't use this pod IP at all, because I said containers, these pods will be coming out and going out, coming and going out. In that case, we should not rely on the pod IP address. We have to rely on the this thing, and I will make you understand once we go to the service, right? So this is how we will create the service namespace.
In that paint itself, sir, in that paint you are explaining, if over here, if you give the name to this third pod, second name space, give one name to the that pod, okay, this last one in the back, this, and can you please try one more time, like how like MySQL call this pod?
Okay,
Just
I will tell you clearly now. Let's say we have 4 namespaces in this case.
Okay.
4 namespaces.
So one atom question, like, is there any specific number of like namespaces we can create?
No, we can have as many namespaces as we want.
Okay.
Okay. So now what I will do is, we are running some object. Some pod is running here. Okay. How to access this pod? There are 2 ways. One with the IP address, another one is with the service object. Service object is something like load balancer, cluster IP, node, port. We will understand that later. So now we have attached this pod to some service object. The name of the service object is, let's say, this is the service object we have attached. This is to access this particular application. Now this name is my service. Name of this is my service. My service, let's say. Okay. Now we have a pod in the same namespace. We have a application in the same namespace. Now it wants to talk to this my service, and they belong to the same namespace, and the namespace name is prod, let's say. Okay, and it wants to talk to this. How it can talk is, it can directly call this as, okay, it can directly call this as my service. When it is calling this my service, then it will be connected to this, and any object in this particular namespace can call this my service directly. But let's say we have an application running in this namespace, and if it wants to talk to this, it can't directly call my service. If it is calling directly my service, it is referring to some service which is there in the same namespace. If that my service is not there, it will throw error. Now, this is in the different namespace called dev, let's say. And if it wants to connect to this, talk to this, to access this, it has to use the name my service dot, what's the namespace? Prod dot svc dot cluster dot local. Okay, this is fine. Now let's take another namespace called QA. And if this wants to talk to this, again, how it can? Same domain name it has to use. Let's say we have another object in some other namespace called staging. How it will talk to this? It will connect to that database using this one. Okay. Got it?
Okay.
When the objects are in the same namespace, they can directly call it as Ramesh. But some other person is calling that Ramesh, they have to specify the surname of the Ramesh as well. That is.
We'll show how to create my service, right?
Yes, I will
Okay.
show that. I will show that.
And
That is
it
the
is vice
name.
versa. Like first is calling to fourth, or fourth is calling to first, right? No? Vice versa, no? Like if
Not vice
staging is
versa. Now,
no,
let's say some object prod is there. Okay. And this service is not there in the prod. The service is there in the where, let's say, staging. And how this prod has to call this? You tell me.
Then
Well,
my service
My
dot
service dot
dot staging
staging dot
cluster.local.
cluster dot local. As simple as that.
Okay.
That is the
Can you
FQDN.
name svc.cluster.local to some?
Yeah, SVC should be there here. SVC should be there here. Somewhat I forgot that.
No, can we change the name of that svc cluster?
No, we can't change that.
Okay.
I don't know whether we can change it or not, but in real time, there is no need for that to change because I think we can't change that. This is the cluster level subdomain. Got it?
Okay, the first one is the service name, right?
Yeah, this is the service name. What is service? We will understand that
Okay.
later.
Okay.
And we have exposed that, right? Using load balancer, we got that. So when I type get SVC in earlier classes, we got the load balancer. Okay, so this name is the service. Here the service name is Kubernetes. Earlier the service name was different. My app pod like that we got. We will understand that extensively in the coming classes. That is the namespace concept. And there are two ways to create the namespace. kubectl create ns or the namespace name. And how to create with the definition files. In most of the cases, not in most of the cases, in 100% of the cases in real time, we will use the definition file. So how it will look like, let's say. Now I want to create a namespace called prod. Okay, prod namespace. I just want to name the file as this, and you know that you can name the file whatever the way we want. Now, how to create that? I said that every Kubernetes object will be having 4 top level elements. Okay, there are some exceptions. In 1 or 2 cases, we don't mention the spec. API version, kind, spec will be there, and metadata should be there, right? Metadata should be there, and the spec. Okay, but in case of namespace, we don't have this spec. And what is the API version for the namespace? That we can get from our document, or let's say you may come across some object. How to check for that? Namespace API version in Kubernetes. It will directly take us to that Kubernetes official documentation.
Laxman?
Yes.
So based on this understanding of namespace, so can I say like if there are two applications, application 1 and application 2, if I want to host on the same cluster, then this namespace will be used. Can I say like that?
Two application. Why do you want to separate them?
I mean,
two application. Why do we want to keep in different namespaces?
Okay, then in that case, like a different namespace means one namespace will be for development.
Yeah, other can be for QA. Let's say we have some namespace called dev. In dev, let's say we have about 100 deployments. Okay, 100 deployments, and some are backend, some are front end, and some are databases, some are related to payments, like that.
Pods and deployments means pods.
Not pods, deployments in the sense we have used the Kubernetes object called deployments. But yes, here I'm using the deployment for some other sense. In some other sense, meaning that we want to deploy 100 microservices.
Then you will mention replicas, right? Yeah.
Replicas we mentioned, and for every deployment we can have many replicas. That is different story.
Okay. Yeah.
Got it? So yeah, I want to have 100 different applications. Okay, and each application can have multiple replicas. So these, out of these 100, some are related to backend, some are related to front end, some are like that. Wow. So if you when we get the kubectl get deployment or kubectl get pods, what you will be having? You will be getting all the 100 deployments in a row. Directly we will be getting that. So why to have that? Let's say I have about 100 files in my desktop. do we keep 100 files like that? What we do, we will categorize them. There
Yeah.
are some personal files, there are some Kubernetes files, there are Docker. So like that, we will be creating the folders and we will be putting that in that folder.
Okay. So
That is.
what is the use of labels then?
Labels means, let's say, we have seen the use of labels, right? Let's say we have, you will understand this in service concept. Let's say we have this prod, this database is there. Now let's say this is some Nginx application is running here. And how do we do that? Using deployment, we have done that. Using a deployment, we have done that. But we have not seen how to create an object for that. So in this deployment, we are having Nginx. How to access this Nginx? I have to create service object and attach to this. How to attach? In that case, I have to attach, I can't use this name. I have to use the labels. Got it? So here itself, we can see here, what is the use of the labels here? I want to create a deployment from which pod definition? This is the pod definition, right? How do I choose that? In deployment, I want to have this pod, I want to select this. How do you choose that? I will choose using the labels only. Okay, and we will also understand that this label slowly we will understand. So in services, we are having the deployment and I have to create a service for that. Service means I want to get some URL for this deployment. So for that, I'm creating a service object to which deployment I want to attach this service to. That thing we will be doing with the help of selectors. Selectors in the sense, we will select the deployment with the particular label. Got it?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Slowly you will understand. In 3 or 4 classes you will understand. Okay. And now what we are telling. So this is fine. Now how to create the namespace with the definition file. So API version. So when I'm exploring that here, I'm not getting. Now let's say I don't want to give this. I just give the namespaces in Kubernetes. If I do this, I have any luck, then they will tell you how to create the namespace. I think I don't know where it is given. I may not be. So here API version.
Namespace, capital N namespace.
Yeah, this is fine. I'm just telling you what is the API version for the namespace. This is the V1. So we have in our documentation, but tomorrow if you want to search for that in this one, so if you search for this, so this is how we can search for. What I'm thinking is if I search for namespace API version, so I want to get it directly in some page or somewhere, but that is not there. So directly we can walk through this and we will be getting that. So API version for that is V1. This is V1. Kind is what kind of object you want to create? Namespace. This is not our will. This format should be followed and N start with capital. Then metadata. Metadata means some additional information about that object. But here there should be given to name. What is the name of the namespace we want to create? Prod. So how to apply this? We can directly use the apply command, or also you can use, if it is the first instance, you can use the create command also. Apply F prod namespace. Press tab. It will be.
You won't create this inside any replica set or some daemon set like that, right?
No, yeah, we won't create that in anything. This is cluster level object. And this is something like folder. After creating the namespace, then we can create the replica sets, deployments, and other things in that particular namespace.
So the namespace name is prod. Okay.
Namespace name is prod. So with this, we got the prod namespace with this. Then if I see the list of resources that are created in this, so I have to use this one. I will get all the resources.
So
Now
what
what
all
I
things
should
we
do?
can create? We can create deployments or pods or
Yeah,
other.
anything we can give everything. Earlier also, when I have created a pod or the deployment, I have created that in a namespace only. In which namespace I have created? In default namespace we have created. By default, we will be into the default namespace.
Okay.
Okay, there in that namespace, in that particular namespace itself, we have to create. These are namespace scoped objects. That means that replica set deployments, all these things can be created in a namespace only. They have to be created in one or the other namespace. They will be created.
Okay, let's see.
That is. Now what I want to do is, that is fine. Now I want to get all the objects in all the namespaces. For that, kubectl get all command is there. If I just apply this, it will give all the objects which are there in the default namespace. That default namespace I don't need to mention here. If I don't mention any namespace, by default it will be default namespace. We will be getting all the resources in that particular default namespace. But this time I want to get all the resources in all the namespaces. For that, I have to use hyphen capital A. Okay, it will give the resources in all the namespace. So this is default namespace, this is cube system namespace. So these are the things. And this A, this is shortcut. Maybe namespace equals to all. No, it may be treated something like this as the namespace hyphen namespace equals to all. I don't know, something it will be there, but I always use, or it may be, I just want to know significance. Otherwise I will search for it, because you may come across this command. kubectl get pods on namespace. See, hyphen all namespaces. I think we have used it that. Oh, we have to use double hyphens here. So either you can use this one, or you can directly, in place of this hyphen n space capital A, we can use. Output will be the same. This is giving some cheat sheet. Use that. So do delete the namespace, and how to deploy some object in the namespace. So let's say we have a deployment, and as a part of this we have so if it is a daemon set, we have to we don't need to specify this. Now let's create a pod here, and how to deploy this pod into a particular namespace. For that, simply we have to write here a property called namespace. Namespace equal, which namespace you want to deploy this? Prod. So if I do this, now if I apply kubectl apply f my nginx pod, okay, now kubectl get pods. Vinayak, what will be the output now?
All pods will show.
Hmm?
It will show all pods, no?
It will show all pods. Okay, will it show this pod as well? We have deployed this pod. Will it show this pod?
Ideally, it has to be, but I don't know.
Why it's not showing this pod?
It is mentioned it is taking as default namespace, sir. So that's
Yes,
why.
yes. So we have to. So generally, in many times, we will be forgetting to mention the namespace, and that namespace we can mention here, or we can mention here as well. Anyway, we can mention in the first instance itself. We can mention kubectl-n prod get pods.
Now we will get.
This is now. If we want to do anything with this pod, I have to mention that particular namespace. Insert it into the pod called myNginx. Then after hyphen, it should be bash. This is. If we want to delete that as well, we have to use that particular namespace. myNginx. Delete pod. We have to use delete pod myNginx. That is fine. Now, what if I delete the entire namespace? Let's say in that prod namespace, I have created some 10 objects. Okay, 10 pods are running, or 10 deployments are running, some 5 services are running, some PVCs are running, all those things. But what I want to do is, I want to delete them all. How to perform? We will delete one by one. But we have another way as well. kubectl get ns. If I delete kubectl delete namespace, if I delete this prod namespace, this namespace will be deleted. That means all the objects that are deployed in the prod namespace will be deleted. And in real time, I have done a mistake in one project that, so I wanted to tell that. That's it for today, friends. And what mistake I have done is, in one of the project, what I have done is, we have about 6 namespaces, and that is development environment, 6 namespaces we have. And I was into all the clusters I have connected to, and there I was in QA environment, not the development environment, QA environment. And I have my own cluster running for practice or some troubleshooting I'm doing with my own cluster. And we can connect from, and we have to switch to different clusters. What I thought is that I have created some namespace exactly same as that of this QA namespace. In my cluster also, I have done the same namespace, and I'm doing something, I'm developing something there. What I done is, I thought that, and in the morning, I have done something in that QA environment. In the evening, I came back to my laptop and I have connected to the cluster. I did not connect to the cluster, and I'm just getting the objects, I'm doing the things. What I thought that I am connected to my cluster. And because that is over, I want to delete that particular namespace. What I thought that I connected to my cluster. Let's say this is my cluster, and this is the QA cluster. How do we name the clusters generally? Let's say if it is deployed in the north with east 1A, where is that sound from? East 1A dev. So we will name the clusters like this, dev east 1A. This is. But we don't see this name, right? Because we are working with this and we don't see the name of the cluster always. Okay. So if you search for kubectl cluster info, so here we will be getting the name of the cluster and all. Okay. So name, this is the EKS cluster. kubectl get context, not get context, kubectl config get context. kubectl config get context. I think it should be icon. See, so here if you see, this is our cluster, demo cluster. When we are working with the kubectl get pods, deploy pods, we don't see that cluster name always. So what I thought is that I connected to my cluster and I have deleted that namespace, and some load performance testing is going on in that cluster. And later they came to know that I have deleted, and I agreed that by mistake I have deleted that. And higher management has called, and they have they became angry on me, and they know that this kind of mistakes will be done. And fortunately, that is which environment? That is QA environment. That is not the production environment. Imagine if that is done on the production environment. I may not be telling to them, and I will be squandering. Okay.
Sir, one query,
Yeah.
not related to namespace. So till yesterday we saw a practical about EKS, right? So there we saw like auto scaling of pods, right?
Mm.
Between two nodes, like cluster, right? So does Kubernetes support auto scaling of node itself, not pod?
Yes, nodes is also there. Okay, I will tell you that. So here, whenever we are creating this Kubernetes cluster, okay, I will come to that one day for sure.
Yeah, sure, fine. Just I wanted to know, is
Yes,
it
it is there.
supported?
That is important. That is the main feature of the Kubernetes.
Okay,
We should
got
have the
it.
scalability.
Sure. You can take as per your convenience. Thanks.
Okay. Thank you, friends. Let's meet on Monday. And one more thing is that this classes will be continued, and only people who have paid money, they will be allowed for this class from Monday. So those who did not complete the payment formalities, please do it if you want to opt for this. And this will be available. And a new link will be provided to the people who already have paid for this through their mail. Otherwise, also it seems like that old link there, right, where we are discussing about the Docker, we have to connect with that link. So please keep that link somewhere.
Okay.
Otherwise, you will check the mail on Monday. They may be creating a new link, or if new link has not been created, and we have to connect with the old link. Okay. Thank you, friends. Bye.
Okay, sir. Thank you.
Hello.
Yeah.
Sir, alias name I tried yesterday, but I could not able to get it.
Which alias name you are talking
That
about?
kubectl alias.
Okay, I
KU
will see whether it will be supporting in the Windows or not, because we are connecting from the Windows machine.
You can
What
create
is
that
that
earlier.
sound,
Separately, no problem. I'm cycling like in the park.
Okay. No worries. Okay, we will see that alias name as well. Okay. So you don't want to run this entire
one more, like,
kubectl command. You want to make it life very simpler, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. I will explore that today. Yeah, Vinayak.
Again, like for curiosity, I'm again clearing my doubt, not related to this academic, like Kubernetes. Just want to know, like the incident you have told about your village, they have not like refilled the gas in the refrigerator, or like
No,
how?
what? No, where is it? Chennai gas, not refrigerator.
Like how
I
frequent we
think
need to refill the gas? Like
not
No, they
refilling
are
the
not
gas.
refilling. Compressor got blasted. It seems.
Yeah, compressor got blasted. What they have done is they not vacated. They were staying somewhere. After few months, they came back to Chennai, and for 2 or 3 days, they wanted to stay in that home. Okay, night they came, and they just slept. They did not check that particular refrigeration condition and all. I don't know whether it is switched on when they came or not. We don't have the details in that. So after few months they came, and they are not maintaining that refrigerator. That compressor got exploded, and it is not because of the explosion they have died. Not because of that. When it is exploded, that gas will be there, right, in the compressor. That gas came out, and that filled the entire room, and they were sleeping, and that came suffocated. Okay, suffocation means they are unable to breathe it. So due to that breathing issue, they died.
Okay. Like even after explosion, they have not awake.
I don't know.
Like, oh my God. Okay, no problem. Okay, thank you.
Okay, so please, I will ping that somewhere. So I did not take Chennai refrigerator explosion. Okay, you can find the details whether they are above or not. Yeah, we can go through that article. Thank you, friends. Bye.
Okay, sir. Okay. Thank you.